From the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt, this is ATN International News. First, the headlines. Chad ruling party wins parliamentary election. Austrian woman killed in Agadez. Italy's airways resume flights to Libya. Louise authorizes offshore wind development. Venezuela condemns new U.S. sanctions. Los Angeles wildfire claims 14 lives. Trump prosecutor Jack Smith resigns. Chad's ruling party won 2/3 of the seats in the legislative election, which was boycotted by many in the opposition last month. Provisional results showed on Sunday, reinforcing President Mahamat Idris Debby's hold on power. Results of the December 29th election sealed the oil-producing Central African nation's transition to constitutional rule more than 3 years after Deby seized control, following the sudden death of his father and long-standing predecessor, Idris Deby Itno. Deby's party, the Patriotic Salvation Movement, secured 124 of the 188 seats at the National Assembly, the national electoral body said. The participation rate was put at 51.56%. The vote, which also included municipal and regional elections, was Chad's first in more than a decade. But opposition leader Success Masra's Transformations Party and several others boycotted the election, saying that the vote was skewed and lacked transparency. Deby was One of the sources said the woman was bundled into a 4x4 by unknown assailants in the Fada district of Agadez, which lies on the edge of the Sahara Desert. Austria's European and International Affairs Ministry said on Sunday that its embassy responsible for Niger had been informed about the possible kidnapping. The embassy is in contact with partner countries and the EU delegation as well as regional authorities on the ground, it added. Niger's Interior Ministry groups linked to the Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. The fighting has killed thousands and displaced millions across West Africa's Central Sahel region over the past decade. Sudan's army said on Saturday it had entered the central city of Wad Madani and was pushing out its paramilitary rivals, the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), a step which, if completed successfully, would be its biggest gain in nearly 2 years of war. The army posted a video appearing to show troops inside the city, which is the capital of LG23. Recapture of the state as a whole could mark a turning point in the war that began in April 2023 over disputes on the integration of the two forces, which has created one of the world's largest humanitarian crises, with the displacement of more than 12 million people and half the population facing hunger. In a speech shared on Telegram, Hemedti acknowledged the defeat, but insisted that the battle was not over. Hemedti also attributed the defeat to what he described as the Sudanese army's reliance on Iranian drones and fighters from Ethiopia's Tigray region. Meanwhile, reports found that dozens of planes had flown from the United Arab Emirates to Chad, likely to resupply the RSF in Chad. The UAE denies the accusations, though a UN panel of experts deemed them credible. Al Jazeera state, located in the center of the country and south of the capital, Khartoum, burning of fields, looting of hospitals and markets, and flooding of irrigation ditches. The army had stepped up its campaign to retake Al Jazeera in recent months after retaking Sennar state in the south, including by increasing airstrikes that have often hit civilians. The RSF's top commander in the state defected to the army in October, and his troops took part in Saturday's operations on the city of Bahri, part of the greater capital, where it has also made advances in recent months. The RSF controls most of the west of the country, where it is fighting the army for Al-Fashir, its last stronghold in the Darfur region. The two forces are also actively fighting over White Nile state in the south of the country. Italy's ITA Airways resumed direct flights to Libya's Tripoli on Sunday, the first airline from a major West European nation to do so after a 10-year hiatus due to civil war in the North African country, ITA and Tripoli's transport minister said. Many international airlines have suspended flights in and out of Libya since the civil war in 2014 that spawned two rival administrations in East and West following the NATO-backed uprising that toppled Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Some airlines resumed flights to Libya after security was restored when major fighting paused with a ceasefire in 2020. But efforts to end the political crisis have failed, with factions occasionally staging armed clashes and competing for control over economic resources. The European Union still bans Libyan civil aviation from its airspace. The Minister of Transport in the Government of National Unity, Mohamed Al-Shahoubi, said the resumption of ITA flights between Tripoli and Rome confirmed the safety and security of our airspace and the eligibility of Libyan airports. Shahoubi said at a ceremony marking the arrival of the ITA flight at Mitiga that Tripoli is ready to grant ITA additional transport rights to connect Libyan airports with other destinations in European Union countries. Libya is looking forward to the return of Royal Air Maroc, Qatar Airways and Saudi Airlines in the first half of 2025, Shahoubi added. He added that the airlines have Tunisia, Egypt, Malta, Turkey, and Jordan had already resumed direct flights with Libya. Ivan Bassato, Chief Aviation Officer of Rome's airports, said the Libya route was a strategic bridge between the two countries. Flights would strengthen the positioning of our hub to support the connectivity of Africa, a continent that in 2024 reached a record level, exceeding the threshold of 2 million passengers to and from Rome, up 38% compared to the. At least 17 people were killed and dozens injured in an explosion of a gas station and a gas storage tank in Yemen's Al-Balda province on Saturday, the Houthi-run health ministry said on Sunday. Of the injured, 50 are in critical condition, the ministry added. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, whose nearly 12 years in office have been marked for him to stand aside, and an increase in the U.S. reward offered for his capture. Maduro, president since 2013, was declared the winner of July's election by both Venezuela's Electoral Authority and top court, though detailed tallies confirming his victory have never been published. Venezuela's opposition says ballot box level tallies show a landslide win for its former candidate Edmundo Gonzalez, who is recognized as president-elect by several countries, including the United States. International election observers said the vote was not democratic. The months since the election have seen Gonzalez's flight to Spain in September, his ally Maria Corina Machado going into hiding in Venezuela, and the detentions of high-profile opposition figures and protesters. Maduro consolidated the coup and the violation of our constitution, Machado added, calling for street protest. It's time to do whatever is necessary to restore it. The government, which has accused the opposition of fomenting fascist plots against it, has said Gonzalez will be arrested if he returns and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Soon, very soon, whatever they do, we will manage to enter Venezuela and put an end to this tragedy, Gonzalez said in his own remarks from the Dominican Republic, asking the military to ignore illegal orders from Maduro and cease any repression. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has signed into law a bill authorizing the development of offshore wind farms. A statement said late on Friday, a bid to strengthen the country's energy security and spark a wave of investments. The new law foresees incentives for the development of offshore energy projects in Brazilian territorial waters, the statement said. Offshore wind speeds tend to be faster and steadier than on land, a potential advantage compared with wind farms built in a continent. But offshore wind farms can be expensive, difficult to build, and potentially affect marine animals and birds, according to the American Geosciences Institute. The Brazilian government said the law provides guidelines for projects and restoration of explored areas, in addition to requiring prior consultations with affected communities to ensure respect for traditional maritime practices and local culture. More than 80% of Brazil's electricity comes from renewable sources, mainly hydroelectric, according to government data. The president vetoed provisions in the law, introducing during the congressional debate, which would maintain incentives for more polluting, expensive and inefficient energy sources such as thermoelectric, coal and gas plants, the statement said. Venezuela on Saturday condemned new sanctions that the U.S., Britain and the European Union imposed the previous day, when the country swore in President Nicolas Maduro for a third term after a 6-month election dispute. The Venezuelan armed forces categorically and energetically reject the new sanctions imposed by the infamous Imperial Brotherhood, wrote General Domingo Hernandez, head of the Strategic Operational Command of the National Armed Forces of Venezuela, in a statement posted on social media. He called the sanctions a desperate action outside the rule of international law. The condemnation came after outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden's administration increased its reward to $25 million for information leading to the arrest or conviction of Maduro on drug trafficking charges. The previous reward was $15 million. It also issued a $25 million reward for Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello and a $50 million reward for Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino, as well as new sanctions against 8 other officials, including the head of State Oil Company PDVSA, Hector Obregon. The U.S. indicted Maduro and others on narcotics and corruption charges, amongst others, in 2020. Maduro has rejected the accusations, and in Hernandez's statements, he said the Venezuelan government has carried out a head-on attack against the scourge of drug trafficking. The US move coincided with sanctions by Britain and the European Union, each targeting 15 officials, including members of the National Electoral Council and the security forces, and Canadian sanctions targeting 14 current and former officials. Firefighters made slow progress in their battle to contain the inferno that has burned wide areas of Los Angeles' Pacific Palisades neighborhood to the ground. But spreading flames and strong winds still threatened communities, and officials warned on Sunday that a death toll of 14 people was likely to rise. Aircraft dropped water and fire retardant on steep hills to stem the eastward spread of the Palisades fire, and KTLA television reported that ground crews had managed to save a number of houses, although others were lost. 6 simultaneous blazes have ripped across the second largest U.S. city since Tuesday, killing at least 14 people as of Sunday morning. At least 16 others were believed missing. California Governor Gavin Newsom said he expected the death toll to rise. "Have got a search and rescue teams out. We've got cadaver dogs out, and there's likely to be a lot more," he told NBC's Meet the Press program. Newsom said the fires are likely to be the worst natural disaster in U.S. history in terms of just the cost associated with it. Active duty military personnel are ready to support the firefighting efforts, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell said in a series on Sunday television interviews, adding the agency has argued residents to begin filing for disaster relief. The blazes have damaged or destroyed 12,000 structures, fire officials said. By Sunday, more than 100,000 people in Los Angeles County had been ordered to evacuate, while another 87,000 faced evacuation warnings. Flames have reduced whole neighborhoods to smoldering ruins, destroying the homes of the rich and famous and ordinary folk alike, and having an apocalyptic landscape. Over the past 24 hours, the Palisades fire spread over an additional 1,000 acres, consuming more homes, officials reported. U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith, who led the federal cases against Donald Trump on charges of trying to overturn his 2020 election defeat and mishandling of classified documents, has resigned as the Republican president-elect prepared to return to the White House. Smith resigned on Friday from the Department of Justice, according to a court filing on Saturday to U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, asking her to lift a court order she issued blocking release of his final report. Notice of Smith's resignation came in a footnote in the filing, which said the special counsel had completed his work, submitted his financial confidential reports on January 7, and separated from the Justice Department on January 10. A former war crimes prosecutor, Smith brought 2 of the 4 criminal cases Trump faced after leaving office, but saw them grind to a halt after a Trump-appointed judge in Florida dismissed one, and the U.S. Supreme Court, with 3 justices appointed by Trump, found that former presidents have sweeping immunity from prosecution for official acts. Neither case went on trial. After Trump defeated Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris in the November 5 election, Smith dropped both cases, citing a long-standing Justice Department rule against prosecuting sitting presidents. In asking courts to dismiss the charges, Smith's team defended the merits of the cases they had brought, signaling only that Trump's impending return to the White House made them untenable. Trump welcomed Smith's departure on Sunday, saying on Truth Social that Smith had accomplished nothing and accused the prosecutor of destroying the lives of many people and families. Smith's departure is another marker of the collapse of the criminal cases against Trump, which could end without any legal consequences for the incoming president, and sparked a backlash that helped fuel his political comeback. We'll go on a short break. When we return, we'll continue with the rest of the stories. Please stay with us.
From the lines across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara We bring all the sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN. From the lines across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all the sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics,
nobody's ambition is what they want.
I have fought very firmly.
natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will not go to jail or face any other punishment for his criminal conviction stemming from hush money paid to a porn star. A judge ruled on Friday but said Trump's January 20th inauguration would not erase the jury verdict. Justin Joan Merchan's sentencing of Trump to unconditional discharge places a judgment of guilt on his record and closes a case that had loomed over Trump's bid to retake the White House. Trump will be the first president to take office with a felony criminal conviction. Merchant said he was imposing the sentence sparing Trump jail, a fine or probation because the U.S. Constitution shields presidents from criminal persecution. But he said that the protections afforded to the office do not reduce the seriousness of a crime or justify its commission in any way. Trump pleaded not guilty and has vowed to appeal the guilty verdict. Appearing with screens beamed to the courtroom with two American flags in the background, Trump called the case an unsuccessful attempt to thwart his re-election campaign. Trump did not testify during the 6-week trial last year, but has repeatedly disparaged Merchan and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who brought the case or probation even less practical. Supreme Court seemed inclined on Friday to uphold a law that would force a sale or ban the popular short video app TikTok in the United States by January 19th, with the justices focusing on the national security concerns about China that prompted the crackdown. During about 2 to 1.5 hours of arguments, the 9 justices beat dance and app users about the risk of China's government exploiting the platform to spy on Americans and carry out covert influence operations while also probing free speech concerns. The companies and users sued to block the law passed by Congress with strong bipartisan support last year and signed by outgoing Democratic President Joe Biden, whose administration is defending it. They appealed a lower court's ruling upholding the law and rejecting their arguments that it violates the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment protection against government abridgment of free speech. Some justices raised apprehensions about the law's impact on free speech, but their prevailing concerns seemed centered on the national security implications of a social media platform with foreign owners that collects data from a domestic user base of 170 million Americans, about half of the U.S. population. Conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh asked Francisco about potential long-term risk of China gathering data on users, especially those who flocked to the app at a young age and using that information over time develop spies to turn people to blackmail people who a generation from now will be working in the FBI or the CIA's department. The Supreme Court's consideration of the case comes at a time of rising trade tensions between the world's two biggest economies. Republican Donald Trump, due to begin his second term as president on January 20th, opposed by the ban. Trump on December 27th urged the court to put a hold on the January 19 deadline for divestiture to give his incoming administration the opportunity to pursue a political resolution of the questions at issue in the case. District of Columbia on Friday filed a lawsuit seeking to hold the federal government responsible for pollution in the Anacostia River, accusing it of systematically contaminating the river over the past 150 years by treating it as a dumping ground for sewage, trash, and industrial waste. District of Columbia Attorney General Bryan, in a lawsuit filed in federal court in Washington, D.C., said the U.S. government should be forced to clean up the river in order to protect residents' health and make it safe for fishing, swimming, and wildlife. He argued the federal government had turned the 9-mile river that flows through Washington, D.C. and parts of Maryland into cost-free toxic dumping ground, wrecking what should be a pristine natural resource and disproportionately harming communities of color living east of the river. The United States is not immune from complying with environmental laws, and today we are suing to hold it financially accountable for the damage it has knowingly and intentionally caused, Schwab, a Democrat, said in a statement. The lawsuit alleges that the federal government, which owns and controls the riverbed, had, through years of polluting since the 19th century, deprived residents of the ability to use and enjoy a healthy river. The lawsuit cited the U.S. Navy's operations at Washington Navy Yard, including shipbuilding and gun manufacturing, which the complaint said polluted the river with carcinogenic PCBs, heavy metals, and other toxic chemicals. The lawsuit did not specify damages but identified some costs the District of Columbia had already incurred, including SOA modernization efforts that have cost taxpayers in the area $1.8 billion. The number of job vacancies in London's financial sector dropped by almost a fifth in the last 3 months of 2024 compared with the previous quarter, to its lowest level since June 2020, Morgan Minkley's London Employment Monitor on Monday showed. Job postings of 3,664 for the fourth quarter period were also down to 12% on the final 3 months of 2023, while the number of vacancies across 2024 as a whole was down 28% on the prior year. The data comes as optimism about the business outlook for the UK financial firms fell at the sharpest pace pace in 2 years in the fourth quarter of 2024. A survey by the Confederation of British Industry (CBI) showed on Thursday. Respondents to that survey flagged concerns about increased costs associated with Britain's autumn budget. But Astbury said the hiring slowdown began well before Finance Minister Rachel Reeves announced tax rises to support public spending. Instead, Astbury pointed to London's dwindling appeal as a stock market listing venue as a factor. If the government is serious about reviving growth, an urgent priority must be to restore the London Stock Exchange's appeal and stem the tide of capital flight, Astbury said. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will stay on Monday. He wants the UK to become the world leader for artificial intelligence, promising to create special zones for data centers and encouraging more graduates to study technology-focused courses. Starmer will say he wants to put AI at the heart of his ambition to grow the economy, while the government will claim if the technology is fully adopted, it could increase productivity by 1.5% a year, worth an extra £47 billion, $57 billion annually over a decade. Ahead of a speech in London by Starmer on AI, the government said it will adopt all the 50 recommendations set out in the report AI Opportunities Action Plan by venture capitalist Matt Clifford, submitted to the government last year. This includes making it easier to build data centers by accelerating planning permission and giving them energy connections. The first such center will be built in Colham, Oxfordshire, home to Britain's Atomic Energy Authority. Our plan will make Britain the world leader, Starmer was quoted as saying in a statement issued by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. That means more jobs and investments. That means more jobs and investment in the UK, more money in people's pockets. Countries across the world are competing to turn their countries into AI hubs while balancing the need for some restrictions on the technology. Britain is the third largest AI market in the world, behind the US and China, when measured by indicators such as investment and patents, according to Stanford University. Starmer will say on Monday that AI has the power to transform the lives of people, including speeding up planning consultations, helping small businesses, and driving down admin for teachers so they can concentrate on teaching. Large British businesses plan to cut hiring this year at the fastest pace since the COVID-19 pandemic and scale back investment due to big tax rises announced in the government's October budget, a survey showed on Monday. Deloitte's quarterly survey of chief financial officers at 63 of Britain's largest companies echoed other surveys of smaller and medium-sized businesses, also hit by the £25 billion, $31 billion hike in employers' social security charges. With cost control to the fore in the wake of the budget, CFOs have trimmed expectations for corporate investment, discretionary spending and hiring in the next 12 months, Deloitte chief economist Ian Stewart said. The survey took place between December 3rd and December 16 before last week's slide in sterling and a surge in 30-year government bond in yields to the highest since 1998, partly on concerns about a slowdown in the economy since the budget. Employment intentions fell by the most since early 2020. Capital expenditure plans were the weakest since the third quarter of 2023, and businesses were the last keen on tasking risk onto their balance sheets in more than a year. Business optimism fell to a 2-year low, but the overall mood was less bleak than lows in 2022 or 2020, Deloitte said. A separate survey published on Monday by manufacturing trade body Make UK reported that 57% of companies would increase investment once the government sets out details of its long-term industrial strategy due in the first half of the year. Manufacturers were split relatively evenly on whether the economy would improve or weaken this year. It is now vital that the government sets out as a matter of urgency that immediate and significant priorities as part of its formal industrial strategy, Make UK Chief Executive Stephen Phillipson said. Croatian President Zoran Milanovic won a second term in the largely ceremonial post. A preliminary result based on vote counting 98.65% of the polling stations showed. Milanovic of the opposition Social Democratic Party was on track to win Sunday's presidential election with 74.58% of votes, according to the State Election Commission vote count. Dragan Primorac, one of the ruling Croatian Democratic Union, won 25.42%. Turnout in the NATO and European Union member states was 44.15% of the voters. Preliminary results showed. Early in foreign policy, defense and security matters. During his term, Milanovic, a populist former prime minister, has confronted Prime Minister Andrej Plenković over foreign and public policies, with two frequently trading insults. 6 people died when a propane butane cylinder exploded at a restaurant in the northwest Czech city of Most, setting the building on fire, emergency services said on Sunday. 8 people were injured in the fiery blast that occurred late on Saturday evening, and 30 people were evacuated from the restaurant and surrounding buildings. The Czech Fire Rescue Service said on X social media platform. According to initial information from witnesses, a heater overturned, causing a fire, the fire brigade said. Interior Minister Vít Bakuso told Czech radio that the cause was likely a propane butane heater overturning into the restaurant's front garden. The fire brigade said it had rescued one seriously injured restaurant guest who had been trapped in a bathroom. Around 20 guests were in the restaurant at the time of the explosion, Czech radio said. Tens of thousands of anti-government protesters in Belgrade on Sunday switched on the lights on their mobile phones and stood in silence for 15 minutes to commemorate victims of a railway station roof collapse, for which they blame authorities. The protest was organized and led by students of the Belgrade State University, who are demanding that those responsible for roof collapse are brought to justice. They blame the ruling Serbian Progressive Party (SNS) of President Aleksandar Vučić for corruption and nepotism, which he and the party deny. Students at state universities in Belgrade and Nice have been blockading classes for weeks to demand the release of all documents relevant to the renovation of the station, as well as criminal prosecution of officials responsible for the disaster. Every day, they block traffic in front of their faculties for 15 minutes to commemorate the 15 victims. The concrete awning of the recently renovated roof of Novi Sad station caved in on November 1st, killing 14 and injuring 3. One of the injured died later. Opposition leaders and the public have taken to the streets repeatedly, blaming the accident on shoddy construction resulting from government corruption and nepotism. The ruling coalition denies those charges, and Vučić has said those responsible must be held to account. We have been unhappy for years, and we came here to express our revolt with authorities and to support students, said Tamara Kovacevic, one of the protesters. Thailand's cabinet has approved a draft law that will legalize gambling, a move aimed at boosting tourism, jobs and investment, Prime Minister Pantengotam Shinawatra said on Monday. Under the government's plan, the new law, which will be sent to Parliament for deliberation, would see gambling take place in large-scale entertainment complexes. Casinos and most forms of gambling are illegal in Thailand, but soccer, betting and underground gaming activities and lotteries are rife, with vast sums of money changing hands. Only some gambling is permitted, such as state-controlled horse races and unofficial lottery. Neighbors Cambodia, Singapore, the Philippines, Laos and Myanmar have benefited from large casino complexes, and Thailand's government has argued the absence of legal casinos means it is turning its back on revenue and not reaching its tourism potential. Tourism is a key driver of Southeast Asia's second largest economy, and Thailand is forecasting record visitor numbers in the next few years. Legalization will generate more state revenue, Pantengotam told reporters. Successive Thai governments have sought to legalize and regulate gambling to boost the economy, but each attempt has faced pushback from conservatives in the Buddhist majority country. The latest move could see foreign visitor numbers grow 5% to 10% and tourism revenue increase by about 120 billion baht to 220 billion baht, which is approximately $3.45 billion to $6.32 billion, said Deputy Finance Minister Julapan Amonivat. South Korea said it planned to improve the structures housing the antennas that guide landings at its airports this year after December's fatal crash of a Jeju airplane, which skidded off the runway and burst into flames after hitting such a structure. The country's transport ministry, which has been inspecting safety conditions at airlines and airports since the Boeing 737-800 jets crashed at the southern western Muan airport, announced the move to change the so-called localizer structures on Monday. 7 domestic airports, including Muan, were found to have embankments or foundations made of concrete or steel that needed to be changed. The ministry said in a statement. It added that it would prepare measures to improve the structures by this month, and it aimed to complete the improvements by the end of 2025. It did not provide details of the planned improvements. Aviation safety experts have criticized the placement of the embankment at Muan Airport and said it likely raised the death toll of the crash, which killed 179 of the 181 people on board. The government has also finished its inspection of 6 domestic airlines flying Boeing 737-800s and found violations at some operators, including exceeding the period of inspection pre- and post-flight and non-compliance with procedures to resolve plane defects or passenger boarding. The government also extended the shutdown of Muan airports to January 19, the ministry said in a separate statement. Philippines on Monday called on Beijing to desist from escalatory actions at a South China Sea. Seoul and said a protest has been lodged over the presence of Chinese Coast Guard, military and navy in its exclusive economic zone. The protest stems from the presence of 2 Coast Chinese Guard vessels on January 5 and January 10 in and around the disputed Scarborough Shoal, one of which was a 165-meter long boat referred to by the Philippines as the Monster. It said a Chinese Navy helicopter was also deployed in the area. The escalatory actions of these Chinese vessels and aircraft disregard Philippine and international laws, said the Philippines National Maritime Council, an interagency group tasked with upholding the country's interests at sea. China should direct its vessels to desist from conducting illegal actions that violate Philippines' sovereign rights in its EEZ, it said in a statement. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said in a news conference that its Coast Guard patrol and law enforcement activities were reasonable, lawful, and beyond reproach. Tensions between China and the U.S. ally, the Philippines, have escalated the past 2 years, with frequent run-ins between their coast guards in the South China Sea, which China claims sovereignty over almost in its entirety. The statement came just hours after Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had a phone call with U.S. Presidents Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, where the 3 leaders discussed China's conduct in the South China Sea. China's expensive claims overlaps with the EEZs of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. The disputed waterway is a strategic shipping route through which about $1 trillion of annual commerce moves. A 2016 ruling of an international arbitral tribunal said Beijing's claims, based on its historic maps, have no basis under international law, a decision China does not recognize. And that's the international news for today. I am Francis Necker. Thank you for watching. Watch us live on our website.
From the lines across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all the sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN. From the lines across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all the sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics,
Nobody's ambition is what
I have fought a very firmly.
natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.